Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of Sefer Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. We are going to begin chapter 22, but I'm going to start chapter 22, that is Perek Chaf Beis, with the last verse in 21, since in the Masoretic text that begins the parsha, that begins the section, the paragraph. So this is chapter 21, verse 31. Sus muchan liyom milchama. A horse is prepared for the day of war, Viladonai hateshua, but the deliverance comes from God. The idea here being that we can prepare for war, we can set up our horse and get him all ready for battle, but ultimately we need to remember that the full outcome doesn't always depend on how well we are prepared for battle. God has a role to play in the main role to play in who wins and who loses. So we need to pay attention to other things other than just our how powerful our horse is. And then it continues with 22 verse 1, Nivchar Shem me osher rav. A good reputation is better, is preferable than great wealth. Mikesef umizav chen tov. A good a graceful personality, a good graceful personality is better than gold and silver. Again, reiterating the theme from the previous verse that ultimately shame is better, a good name is better than wealth, because you can have all that wealth, you can have that sus muchan for war, but ultimately all of that is dependent upon God. The wealth can come, the wealth can go. But having a grace, being a good person, is something that you can always be. And then it continues again in verse 2, that Ashir Varosh Nifgashu. Malbim, by the way, among the classic commentaries, understands this way, that verse 2 is now a continuation, an explanation. Ashir Varosh Nifgashu, because both the wealthy man and the poor man, they meet in the same place. Osei chulam Adonai. God is the one who creates them all. Ultimately, some of us are rich, some of us are poor. Someday we're rich, the next day we're poor. And we meet. We all meet in the end in the same place. God makes us all, and therefore it is better to choose shame. It's better to be a good person. It's better to choose a good reputation and grace than it is to be all prepared, whether it's for war or whether it's wealth, and so on. Arum ra'ah v'nistar. A smart person, an intelligent person, a arum is best translated as a shrewd person, sees the potential evil, he sees the potential where this can go, v'nistar, and he stays away from a bad path. In other words, you always have to pay attention to where this can go wrong, and stay away from the bad path. But fools, avru v'ne'nashu, they continue on that path, they keep going, and they end up getting punished for it. Person sees, where this is going to end. When you look at the end result, whether it's battle, when tried to think about, well, what's going to happen after XYZ? What are we going to do after that? What's our plan for the end result? You need to have a plan. If you see it and you realize that it can go to a bad place, an arum, a shrewd person, stays away. A foolish person walks right into the trap. Ekev anova yiras Adonai. The result, that which happens on the heels of humility. When one has humility, the result of that is fear of God. And fear is not really the best word, it's awe of God. When one is humble, one realizes how great God is, and following that is osher, wealth, v'chavod, and honor, v'chaim, and life. Because one will never, and as we'll see as we read through this chapter today, and as we've seen throughout, of course, the book of Mishlei, right? Wealth comes and goes, but when one has humility, then one has the grace, one has the good reputation that we discussed before. True everlasting wealth is something that will belong to that person forever. Tzinim pachim b'derech ikesh. the way on the road, on the path of a twisted person, of a dishonest person, is thorns and thistles and traps. Shomer nafsho, but a person who wants to take care of himself and who's responsible for himself, yirchak mehem, he will stay away from such a path. And ikesh, a twisted, dishonest person, goes on a path. Again, we're talking. So the emphasis this chapter is so much on the path we choose in life, and foreseeing the potential places where it can go wrong, and staying away from them or doing what we can to avoid them. Chanoch lenar. This is verse 6. This is a very famous verse. Educate or train your to a child al pi tarko, according to his way. Gamki yazkin, so that even when he gets old, lo yasur mimena, he will not stray from that path, he will stay upon it. There's a lot to be said about this verse. It's a very famous verse. It's often repeated when discussing the issues of education and philosophies and ideas of education. There's really, I'm going to just mention two, Rashi and Ralbag, who understand this very differently. Rashi understands this as an observation, as opposed to a lesson. There's Chanoch Lenar, Alpi Darko, if one trains a child according to his way, in other words, you train the child, and according to that way, that's the path he will stay on the rest of his life. In other words, remember that the path you choose, you can choose to train him in a bad way, and then he'll be on a bad path. If you choose to choose, so in other words, it's an observation. Whereas the Ralbag understands this more as a command or as advice. Command is not the right word. The better word would be advice. That train the child according to his way, the way of that child. Each child needs a different type of training. And the Ralbag's understanding is more commonly used today when discussing this verse in the context of education. It's a much more kind of a more modern way of understanding it. Obviously, Rashi's way is still very true on every level, but if we look at it as that advice, it's saying every child, there's a different type of appropriate approach to each child. Each child has it, and you should choose that so that the education is effective and that he stays on the proper path throughout his or her life. Ashir birashim yimshol, a wealthy man rules over people that are poor. And this is an observation of the Eved Lova Lishmalve, and the person who is indebted is subservient, is a servant to the person who lends money. This is just an observation, so try to stay away from borrowing and being subservient from others, if at all possible. Zorea avlo yiktzor oven, one who plants avla is injustice. If that's what you plant in the environment that you're in, then what are you going to reap when it comes time to harvest? You're going to reap suffering and pain and sin. V'shevet evraso yichle, and the stick, a rod. Shevet is a rod of the person's wrath. Evra is usually translated as wrath. I've seen in some understandings, which I really like better, in the Sansino, Alfred Rabbi Cohen, Reverend Dr. Cohen, in his version, he compares this Evra to the word Evra in Yeshayahu in Isaiah 16, that's chapter 16, verse 6, where the word Evra is used in the context of being arrogance. So the rod of this person's arrogance, the person who is Zorea Avla Yichle, it will end, it will fail. When a person is arrogant, he might be successful for a while, but ultimately the arrogance will get to him, and it will be his downfall. So the rod that he uses in his arrogance to hurt other people eventually will fail. Tov ayin, however, on the other hand, verse 9, the flip side is a person who is, literally that translates to a good eye, which means here a generous eye in this context. Such a person will be blessed. In other words, ultimately, he may lose a little bit now by giving to others. He may have some challenges, but in the end, he will be blessed. And again, this goes back, he will have a shem tov, he will have a good reputation, he will have chen. Why? Ki nosan milachmo ladol, because he gave from his own bread to the person who was poor. Advice in verse 10, Goresh leitz, get rid of those who are cynical, get rid of, I've been translating leitz as a cynic, v'yetzei madon, and fights and disagreements will leave. If you are in a group of people, get rid of those who don't take it seriously. Get rid of those who are cynical. Get rid of those who are not serious. And then you won't get involved in fights. People will work together towards a common goal. V'yishbos din v'kolon. And all of the arguments that people have with each other, and the kolon, and one making fun of the other, all those kinds of things will end. They will be gone. Ohev tahar lev. Instead, you should love he who is pure of heart. Those are the ones that you should bring into the group. That's verse 11. Chen sifasav, the grace that comes with his lips. A person that has grace in his lips, a person that speaks that way, that speaks nicely to others and has a pure heart. Re'ehu melach, his friend will be the king. Now Rashi consistently has been translating the melech throughout the book of Mishlei as referring to God himself, and I think this is a nice way of understanding this verse, using Rashi's understanding, Re'ehu melech, that you will be the friend of the king, meaning the king with a capital K, God, if you are a person of pure heart and you speak nicely to others. If you understand it as king, as just leaders, then it's an observation, right? That the king wants someone who's honest, who's good, who gets along with other people. It'll get you good in position in this world. Verse 12, Eine Adonai notzru das. The eyes of God, right? The eyes of God take care of, and linsor is to guard and to watch and to take care of. Das, someone who has knowledge, someone who uses knowledge. Visalef divrei boged, but the words of someone who is rebellious, who is treacherous is the best word here for boged. They're rebellious, but not in a good kind of rebellion, but rebellious. They're treacherous. They're not faithful. They're not trustworthy. God, salef, he undermines them, undermines the support that they have. So God is looking out for people who are who use das, intelligence, and wisdom in their actions, as opposed to someone who is treacherous and someone who is dishonest. Omar otzel, a lazy man always comes up with excuses. This is verse 13. Ari bachutz, he'll come up, there's a lion outside. I'm not going out. I'd rather just stay here on my couch and do nothing, because maybe I'll get hit by a car. Maybe there's a lion out there. They're always coming up with excuses, even crazy excuses. I'm going to get murdered in the street. Someone's going to shoot me, right? He's always coming up with excuses. Shucha amuka pizaros. This verse 14 is a reference to the woman who convinces someone, who seduces someone into adultery, or the image of anyone. That the Zoros, the ones who are Zor, who are far away, who are strange, they're the people with whom you shouldn't be associating, because they're drawing you into the example here is that of an adulterous woman, but it could be anyone who tries to entice you into a world where you don't belong. It's like a deep pit, Zu'um Adonai Paul Sham, right? Anyone who falls into that trap will end up incurring God's anger, God's wrath. Verse 15, Ivelet kishura belev na'ar. If something foolish lands in the heart of a young person, right? Shevet musar yarchikenu mimeno. Sometimes harsh discipline, literally that means the rod of discipline, right, will get him away from it. Sometimes a punishment is necessary when a child, or sometimes even an adult, gets a wrong idea and goes on a wrong path. Sometimes you have to show them the unfortunate potential consequences of going down that path. And this about to read verse 16, which I'm going to end this podcast with. This is a very interesting verse. O sheikh dol laharbo slow. sometimes a person can be Oshe Gdol, right? Will cheat a poor man in order to gain benefit. No sein lo ashir. Sometimes one can give to a rich man ach limachzor, but end up losing. Now, what is this meaning of this verse? There's various ways to understand this, right? One way, and this Rabbi Cohn in the Sansino, that I kind of really like his explanation, I've quoted from him many times, he explains this as when you choose the wrong path, right? Sometimes it can lead to gain, and sometimes it can lead to loss. Sometimes you can choose the wrong path, be an Oshek Dal, right? You can oppress others, laharboslo, and gain wealth from it. But sometimes you can give to the wealthy. Somebody comes in and says, invest with me and you're going to get millions of dollars, right? And you invest with him and it all goes kaput into his Ponzi scheme, right? And you end up achla machzor, losing. Now, it's one way, the way he explains it, which I really like. But the one that I really like the most is Rashi's explanation here, and that is, looking at it, is you start by being Oshek Dal. If you start by earning your money in an oppressive way, in a dishonest way, by being Oshek Dal laharboslo, in order to gain money, what's the next thing you're going to do? Is you're going to start bribing or giving your money to the rich man, and achle machzor, and you're going to lose it all. You're going to lose all that wealth that you gained, because now you try to cozy up to the wealthy guy who's dishonest, because he's also dishonest. You're going to cozy up to him and lose everything because you started in a dishonest way by oppressing others. This verse 16 ends really the second section of Mishlei. Verse 17 starts back on a similar path to the first section of Mishlei, which was from the beginning until, let me just remember for a second, from the beginning until chapter 7 or so, right? But this is, anyway, regardless, it'll change the tune a little bit in verse 17. We'll talk about it more in the beginning and next time, why the 17 seems to begin another section, right? Mostly because it changes to to a different tone. It changes to the tone of a sage or a father or a teacher figure speaking to his student, his disciple, which was the tone we had back in the beginning, and we kind of veered off from that for the last bunch of chapters. So this is a perfect place to stop. Thank you so much for studying 22a with me. I really thank you so much for participating. Feel free to send me comments directly by email at weinrebsaul, that's WEINREBSAUL @gmail.com, or comment in any of the public forums where the podcast appears, and I'll do my best to respond. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.